Well, I think we'll get started. I want to welcome all of you to tonight's discussion on parenting in sports. At this time, I'd like to have Adriana Thomason come up and do a prayer. Are you ready? Okay.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for giving us this day along with yesterday and tomorrow. We're grateful we can all come together tonight and discuss our common ground of sports. You help us seek not individual glory, but the success of others, and for that we thank you. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Adriana. I'd also like to thank Jan Larson and Jon Hart and Riley Nordquist for helping us make this possible, and Sandy Christopherson for set up at the Sherman Center tonight. So thank you to all of those people. At this time, I'd like to have Scott Schmidt come up and say a few words. Scott's the assistant professor of business sports and sports management, and Scott is the former director of the Corn Palace, a DWU graduate in his first year as a faculty member at DWU. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Curt. I'd like to welcome everybody here together tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Kind of how this came to fruition. Curt called me one random afternoon asking me if I've ever heard of Dave Vilhauer, and he's a new author of a book, The Parent Trapped Within. And Curt kind of thought that it would go hand in hand with the sports management program. And coming into this semester, the two classes that I have are sports policy and sports and society. I thought the information, once I talked to Dave, was very pertinent to our curriculum in regards to what we were going to go over for our topics. After having a brief discussion with Dave sending me a copy of his book, thank you so much, read the book, and we had a conversation in regards to how we could get Dave on campus. And without the introduction from Curt and the conversations with Dave, this wouldn't have came to fruition. But I do need to thank, like Curt said, Riley Nordquist, Jan Larson for getting information out there so quick. I think we talked on a Wednesday and Thursday morning. All the information was sent out, so thank you so much, and thanks to the IT staff up here for running microphones, getting everything set up, physical plant for getting all the chairs set up. Without further ado, I'm not going to delay you any longer. Thanks so much for coming, and back to Curt.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate that. You know, it's just a pleasure to introduce Dave Vilhauer. By now, I'm sure most of you know, or have you seen Dave's bio either in our press releases or knew about his book and preparing for this event. If you have not read Dave's book, The Parent Trapped Within, he'll have a copy of his out back there. To make sure you get one, please take the opportunity to do that, and if possible. Dave Vilhauer worked at the Aberdeen American News for 36 years. He joined Hub City Radio in 2016 as News and Sports Director. Among his many awards, he has been South Dakota Sports Writer of the Year, Sportscaster of the Year, has received the Eric Severide Award for Merit, Press Person of the Year, Distinguished Service Award from the South Dakota High School Activity Association, just to name a few. Dave and I go back a lot of years. It was always a pleasure to spend time with him at state events during my time on the South Dakota Activity Association and those years before and after that. I've got to tell you, when Dave and Ryan Deal and John Pappendick were at the Aberdeen American News, I always called them the dream team. And then we were lucky enough to get Ryan to come up here to Mitchell. So I was always so impressed with them. I followed the Aberdeen American News, although living down here my whole life, but received that paper for a long time just because of those guys. So it's indeed a pleasure of mine to honor and introduce Dave Vilhauer.
Good evening. I can't tell you how honored I am to be here tonight in front of you, and thank you for coming out on a chilly night. I know that our time is very busy, and for you to come out tonight means a lot to me. Also, for those who may be viewing via live stream, thank you for tuning in tonight, and I'm really looking forward to this. We've got a great group of panelists here that we'll be talking in just a minute. And I really want to thank the Dakota Wesleyan University for bringing this together. Curt Hart, Jon Hart, Scott Schmidt, all very instrumental in setting this up. And again, the goal here tonight for me is not to sell a ton of books. The goal here for me is to try and help you and myself to change our current sports culture for the better. That's really the whole goal of the book, is to try and enlighten people to issues that we are faced with in our current society. Before I tell you a little bit about what the parent trapped within is, I'd like to tell you what the parent trapped within isn't. If you look at this book, okay, the parent trapped within isn't War and Peace, okay? This is not a huge, thick volume of information. And as I like to say, I don't know that many big words, so this is a very easy read. When you start reading it, I'm hoping that you aren't going to have to bang your head against the wall 4 times to say, what's he trying to talk about? I've actually had people who have sat down to start reading the book, and the next thing you know, a few hours later, they finished it. So that is the whole goal. Our attention spans are so short, especially in this day and age. In fact, some of you have already begun tuning me out, and I've spoken less than 2 minutes, okay? That's the society that we live in. So this book is written for today's reader, okay? I know what my kids are like, and I know what college kids are like, and very few people sit down and read a big, thick, bound volume of anything anymore. So the goal is to not only write a book, but to get people to read a book. It's kind of like if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it really make a noise? If a person writes a book and nobody buys it, or they buy it and they don't read it, does it really matter? Probably not. So the goal is to get people to read the book. So it isn't War and Peace. The other thing that the book is not is a parent trashing book. And when word got out that this book was coming out, there was an individual that said, it sounds like a book that you would buy for someone else, but you should probably read yourself, okay? And I think there's some people that maybe are, a little hesitant to buy the book because they're afraid it's going to strike a little too close to home. And it really would have served no purpose whatsoever to write a parent trashing book because, one, who would buy it, and what good would it do? So this book basically examines a problem, identifies how we've gotten there, and then tries to provide some common sense solutions to what we can do about it. We're going to see if my clicker works here. I think we will have it. When people find out I wrote a book, I always want to take the shortcut. What's it about? Can you tell you in 3 sentences or less, what's the book about? Well, I can do it in 1 sentence, actually. To basically encompass the whole book is the parent can never want it worse than the athlete. It just doesn't work that way. One of 2 things is at play if that is happening. The parent is either overly invested or the athlete is not invested enough. And it's been my experience that if the athlete is putting in the time, going to camps, hitting the weights, running the ladders, all of those sorts of things, the athlete's probably pretty invested, which means that the parent is overly invested. And, people are well-intentioned, but sometimes they just don't think things through. I just had a discussion about 2 weeks ago with an individual. I'm going to take this mic out of here because I don't know if I can just stand here the whole night, but maybe I can. I had a discussion with an individual not too long ago, and he thought in his mind that it was okay for a knowledgeable parent to pull the coach aside and give him a few pointers on what plays to run. And I said, really? I don't think that's a good idea. I said, how would you like it if I came into your place of work and told you how to do your job? Can you imagine for 1 second somebody pulling Coach Wilber aside and say, I think you're misusing Ty Hoagland? I don't think that would go over too well. And just to be on the record, I don't think you can misuse Ty Hoagland. I mean, yeah, he's a good enough player. You can put him anywhere, and I think you're going to be in pretty good shape. But that's to not only have the audacity to do that, but then to justify it and think it's okay. That's how that's how the world we're living in. Now, have we always had problems with sports parents? Absolutely, we have. But you know what? It's getting worse. And their methods are getting more creative. There was a person that told me last year that a parent texted a coach at halftime to tell them what strategy to try in the second half. Now, I don't know how many coaches have their phone on at halftime. Coach Christensen, you ever check your phone at halftime? No, didn't think so. But you know what? There are some. Tim Miles, when he was at Nebraska, he would actually tweet out stuff from the locker room. They're playing Michigan State, and he'd be on Twitter saying, well, we really need to, hit the boards better and cut down on our turnovers. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? I loved him. But to actually put that stuff out there on social media at halftime of a Big Ten basketball game? But again, we live in a different culture now than we used to. So anyway, we're talking about, that is the real issue here, is parents kind of overstepping their bounds a little bit. And I want to look at just a couple things briefly tonight and how they tie in with sports parenting. And you may not even think there's a correlation until we kind of delve a little bit deeper here. I like to call this one the numbers game. And, we have become, I wouldn't even say infatuated, I wouldn't even say consumed. I would say we have become obsessed with numbers, okay? How many touchdowns did you score? How many points? We have gotten to the point now where everybody is scoring 1,000 points, 2,000, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants to know, Kennedy Cheeseman just scored her 2,000 point, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, that we have gotten to the point now where they are just all over the place. My niece recently scored her 1,000 point in Minnesota. On that night in Minnesota, there were 9 girls that scored their 1,000 point on that night alone. Now, when I was growing up, I know we had 1,000 point scorers. I'm sure we did, but nobody ever talked about them. And there's 2 examples in the book. Kerry Horniman, in my opinion, the greatest basketball player ever at Roncalli, maybe best athlete. He played in the Cincinnati Reds organization for minor league baseball. He held the scoring record for 30 years, almost 40 years. And they got a hold of him and they said, Kerry, your record's about to be broken. And Kerry's response was, what record? Didn't even have a clue that he still had the record, let alone how many points he scored. Doug Schlepp, I don't know if, the old timers, you might remember Doug Schlepp. Standout player at Java, a school that doesn't exist anymore. Went on to play at South Dakota School of Mines, scored over 2,400 points in college. Really good player. And I was talking to him one time. I said, Doug, how many points you score in high school? He said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? Well, the school closed down, the records were lost, and nobody has them. Nobody seems to know. And I said, was it more than 1,000? Oh, yeah, it was way more than 1,000. I said, well, doesn't it bother you that you don't know how many points you scored? He goes, no, why should it? So therein lies the cultural difference from 35, 40 years ago, where people were still scoring 1,000 points, to where we're at now, where there's people scoring 1,000 points. I mean, you go on social media and you can't click on a day where there's not somebody scoring 1,000 points. Now, again, that's a good accomplishment, but here's where it leads to issues, in my opinion. I know of at least 2 schools in South Dakota that combine JV points and varsity points so their kids can get to 1,000. I know coaches that have left their starters in the game up 40 so they can pad their stats and get to 1,000. I know coaches that have pulled their starters up 25 with 4 minutes to go and stuck them back in 2 minutes later so they can get more points. Again, it's leading to a big culture change here. And we've got people in the media, social media, that went on Twitter last year. Let's do a poll. How many touchdowns is Johnny going to get tonight? Okay, you're going to try and tell me that that leads to team unity when we've got people out here projecting how many points somebody's going to score on a given night? No, I'm not trying to belittle people with talent who can score a lot. I'm just saying there's been a huge cultural shift here, and it's affecting parents because now teams are tendency to run up the score because, oh, you're getting close to 1,000. Oh, we're getting close to 1,500. And trust me, people know this stuff. And if you don't believe me, you watch anytime somebody hits a milestone, the fans are there with their banners, their embroidered quilts, their posters, everything. It's all planned out. It doesn't even come naturally anymore, okay? And so now we've got parents trying to one-up each other. Hey, my kid got 1,000. What did your kid get, you know? Next thing you know, teams are beating each other by 50, 60 points. It's causing hard feelings. And again, you don't think of just a big score, you know, having an issue or a correlation with sports parenting. But we've reached a point now where we've kind of crossed the line, in my opinion. And again, I'm all for applauding accomplishments, but do it naturally. Don't run up the score, and don't force feed somebody against a weak opponent so they can get their 1,000 or their 2,000 or whatever the case may be. Okay? We're going to get into the next one here, but one more thing I want to touch on there. Everybody is so consumed with numbers. I recently read a post that said an announcer on the East Coast had just announced his 2,633rd game. And I'm sitting there thinking, who keeps track of this stuff? I mean, I don't know how many thousands of games I covered, but I certainly wasn't sitting there going, boom, boom, boom. It's like, it reminds me of a person in jail, you know, putting the chalk on the wall, seeing how many days he had been there. I mean, does it really make any difference after a while? Announcers keeping track of all that stuff? Okay, here is a big, big one for me. Social media influence. And I know I'm going to be pretty unpopular with this, but I believe that we are killing society one post at a time. When you see some of the stuff that's being put out there on social media, and it's just so tempting for everybody, but especially teenagers, and it just leads to ill will. And again, we talked about briefly about the poll of how many points a person can get, how many touchdowns, whatever. Well, now what I'm seeing is people who really should know better, media types, okay, going out on social media, and it used to be when I was reporting, when I was brought up, you kept your opinions out of things. You reported on what you saw, not what you felt. If you really felt strongly about something, it was called commentary, and you put it in a column. Now, we've got people, media members, whether it's print, whether it's broadcast, whether it's TV, and they're out there saying, that was a horrible call by that ref. They're second-guessing the coach's decisions. They're putting all of their personal bias on things. And what do you suppose that does for mom and dad sitting in the stands? They don't need to be empowered. They already have enough power as it is. But now when you've got somebody who's supposedly knowledgeable, egging them on about, oh, that coach doesn't know what he's doing, or those refs were out to get us, that's all it takes. And now mom and dad are into the mix, into the fray, and it just leads to more trouble. And again, there are so many temptations here with social media. Here's another key topic. Sports specialization. Oh boy, is this a hot one right now. Okay, well, how does this lead to sports parenting? Well, I have yet to meet an athlete that decides on their own, I'm just going to concentrate on one sport. It's not coming from them. And it's probably not coming from the college coach that's recruiting them. In fact, I've talked to many college coaches, and I can't remember a single one of them that said, we want our recruits to be single sport athletes in high school. In fact, it is just the opposite. Every one of them says, we want our kids to be all kinds, we want well-rounded athletes. We want our recruits to play multiple sports in high school. And, you know, you look at all of the negative things that are involved in sports specialization, and everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. Oh, if my son or daughter just concentrates on one sport, they're going to go to Duke. They're going to Duke on a scholarship. You know how many kids from South Dakota have gone to Duke on a basketball scholarship? I can't think of any. Okay? So now you've got this kid who is giving up their other sports that they're good at to concentrate on one thing. They're getting hurt because there's been studies done about repetitive motion. Okay? They're getting burned out because they're doing the same thing over and over again. And you look at the opposite side of that, where these teams are picked in 4th, 5th, 6th grade. I can name a ton of kids who blossomed late in life. Didn't even grow into their bodies until they were juniors in high school. Some of them went on to become phenomenal players. I'm wondering how many never even went out because guess what? The team's already picked. I don't belong with that squad. They've been playing together for 5 years already. I'm not even going to go out. So again, we're talking about, really a negative situation. And I'm going to cite an example here. In fact, I told him I was going to use his name tonight because I saw him out in the foyer. I covered a multi-sport athlete in high school by the name of Mason Larson. I'm sure a lot of you here tonight, probably all of you here tonight, know Mason Larson, good basketball player for the Tigers. Mason, in high school, was a key member of the state championship football team at Langford area. We all know about his basketball exploits, but did you know that Mason was a state champion hurdler in track and field? Now, you can say, well, yeah, might have hindered his basketball progress. I guarantee you, if he were here right now in this room, I think he would say it enhanced his basketball playing ability, playing multiple sports. Okay? So again, don't drink the Kool-Aid and say, well, my kid's got to do this. Again, it's not coming from your son or daughter. It's probably coming from you and potentially your high school coach. One of the things that we struggle with, I think, is trying to define what the true measure of success is. We've reached a point in our culture where we say, how many points did you average? How many tackles did you get? How many state championships were you involved in? If that's going to be our measure of success, guess what? Most of us are going to be failures. Okay? If you're going to base your success on how you did in your last game, 90% of teams lose their last game. No matter how good you are, there's only going to be one state champion. So you can't measure, that can't be your measuring stick. Okay? So what is measure of success? Okay? For me, it's giving a God-honoring effort. We're all blessed differently. We don't all have the same talents. But if we're maximizing that, you could argue that that's successful. There's a small community, I'm sure most of you have heard of it, Ipswich. It's located exactly 25 miles west of Aberdeen. Their head coach, Todd Thorson, is a good friend of mine, and he has built a dynasty in track and field and cross country. And Ipswich is not a metropolis. And you can't tell me that every good runner grew up in Ipswich. Okay? That just doesn't happen. And the thing I really like about Todd is he tries to keep everything in perspective. And I'm going to steal a quote out of the book. He said, this was a quote that he gave me before a state championship track and field meet about 8 years ago. We don't worry about place. Winning events has never been a high priority. I think you set kids up for failure when you talk strictly about winning. And here's a guy that wins more than anybody, and they don't talk about winning. They talk about effort. They talk about improvement. They talk about being a good teammate. Okay? So, again, the successes, the wins and all of that sort of thing will be byproducts of doing things the right way. Little things add up to big things. There's an old saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Okay? If you're doing things the right way, then success will follow. Maybe not even in state championships like it has for Ipswich, but it will follow. It's interesting because on Saturday, I had the privilege of selling my book at the Dakota Wesleyan Classic. And I'm out in the foyer, and I'm sitting there with my back to the floor. I'm out in the foyer, and I'm looking out the front door, the glass doors of the Corn Palace. And as I'm hearing the roar of the crowd and all the atmosphere and electricity and stuff, the thought occurred to me, this is just a really safe haven for kids. To be in here and playing a game of basketball. And then I thought, you know, we're kind of sheltered off from the real world. The real world is beyond these doors, where there's all kinds of stress, like, you know, maybe not being able to pay the rent, or being involved in an abusive relationship, or maybe somebody's got a terminal illness. And I thought, wow, this is a lot different. And then I packed up my books and put them away, and I went in to watch the games. And as I'm watching these games, I'm looking at the people around me and their expressions and the things that they are saying. And I'm thinking, you know what? There's more stress in here right now than there is on the other side of that Corn Palace door. And that shouldn't be. So, you know, why are we stressing and fussing? And these people were not even playing. Some of them probably didn't even have a dog in the fight. And yet they were there and acting out, and some of them looked like death warmed over. And I'm like, boy, this is just kind of sad. This is a game. You know, this isn't even really real life. So as I get to wrapping things up here, I just want to talk a little bit about parents' roles, okay? And parents do have a role. It is not the role of judge and jury telling your son or daughter everything they did wrong. They don't want to hear that. Your role is not that of coach unless you are, in fact, the coach. Your role is not the official, because you certainly aren't going to be the official reffing your own son or daughter, okay? And I don't expect you to sit there and do your best mannequin impression at these games and, you know, whatever. You can cheer, but be positive and be supportive. And I'm going to steal a couple lines from Wayne Carney. Wayne's been a longtime friend of mine. He's here tonight. He's going to serve on this panel. And this is actually in the book. I love it. Wayne says there's only three things you need to ask your kids when they're done with a game. Did you have fun? What did you learn? And where do you want to eat? Okay? And I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly right. Okay? We don't need to sit there and, you know, shake our finger at them saying, that guy was open in the third quarter, what are you thinking? Okay? Chances are they probably already know that guy was open and they missed the pass. Okay? They're going to learn. That's what the coach is for. Okay? Next day you break down some film, you find that stuff out. But yet, here we are thinking that we're entitled to just, you know, tell our kids whatever's on our mind. The last thing I want to say here is there is a sunset clause. And, you know, if I could go back and relive some of those days and watch my son and daughter again, it hasn't even been that long, and I miss it, but I knew from the time they got started that it was going to come to an end. I mean, nothing lasts forever. And if there's one thing that I've learned is you have to value the journey more than the results. And I've always maintained that there's been a lot of life lessons in extracurricular activities for those who participate. Self-discipline, motivation, teamwork, chemistry, all of that. What I failed to realize until I wrote the book is that there are a lot of life lessons for parents of athletes as well. And part of me wishes I would have written this 5 years ago, so I would have maybe enjoyed my journey a little bit more than I did. And I'm very transparent in the book. There's times I look very bad, but I'm honest. And if me looking bad can help somebody else and prevent them from looking bad and to give them some wisdom and guidance, I'm willing to look bad. Don't take these years for granted. They promise to be the most eventful, stress-filled, unpredictable, joyous, meaningful, and rewarding times of your life. There's nothing quite like being a sports parent. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. I probably, looking back on it, would have done a few things differently, said a few things differently, because you always learn, but you learn too late sometimes. But if you're a parent, and some of you are grandparents, same rule applies, Some of you are going to be parents of athletes someday, you college students, hopefully. You know, a lot of you guys will be sports parents someday. Enjoy it. You know, there's going to be times where your fingernails might be gone, where you're stressed out, where you're maybe aging a little prematurely, but that's okay. That's all part of the process. That's part of the journey. So as we get into our discussion tonight, my goal here tonight is to just shed a little light, encourage you, and let's work together to try and improve the sports culture in the future. Thank you.
Well, now I'd like to introduce our panel for tonight. Our first member I want to come up is Clay Glasgow. Clay is in his 6th season as DWU's head women's soccer coach. He's coached many NAI All-American scholars, first-team GPAC players, coached DWU to 7 all-academic team honors, and just this past weekend, he and head men's soccer coach Jose Lopez brought in more than 130 teams to Mitchell and the campus for their annual soccer classic. And he has coached at Sioux Falls Roosevelt, Augustana, and for the Dakota Alliance. He has also played for the Sioux Falls Spitfire. Clay Glasgow. Ross Cimpl. Ross Cimpl is in his 9th year as head football coach at DWU. Ross is the most successful football coach in the 100-year history of DWU football. Ross also played and was team captain for 2016 national championship team at another college. Ross Cimpl. Matt Wilber. Matt Wilber's in his 7th season as head men's basketball coach at DWU. His 2014-15 team had the best season record in school history at 32-5. He was runner-up national tournament in 2015. He's had 5 straight trips to the national tournament. In 2015, Matt was named National Coach of the Year. Matt Wilber. Jason Christensen. Jason's in his 10th year as head women's basketball coach at Dakota Wesleyan. Last 2 years has led his team to the NAIA Final Four. In 2018, he coached the only basketball team to win a national championship in DWU school history. He's the winningest coach in women's basketball history at DWU, and he was named National Coach of the Year in 2018. Jason Christensen. Jon Hart. Jon has been at DWU for nearly 13 years. 4 years as Associate Athletic Director, and he's in his 4th year as Athletic Director. He received his undergraduate and graduate degrees at DWU, and Jon was a multi-sport athlete at DWU, playing football and baseball. Jon Hart. And last but not least, Wayne Carney. Wayne has done it all. His long list of accomplishments during his time as coach, administrator, and longtime executive director of the South Dakota High School Activities Association and a member of the South Dakota Hall of Fame. If you were involved in high school sports and activities in South Dakota in the last 20 to 25 years, Wayne Carney has made a positive difference in your life. I have been a friend of Wayne's for more years than that I want to count, especially during our time as together at South Dakota Activities Association. We wore a patch to all the state events that said, "Serving students since 1905. Wayne took that very seriously. There has never been one person who has worked harder or attended more activities than Wayne Carney during his time as executive director. He never forgot he was serving the students of South Dakota. Wayne Carney. To get started, I'm just going to have a question that a lot of our students gave us to ask this panel members, but at any time during this, I want you to speak up, ask a question, or if any of the panel wants to respond to a question I'm asking in particular one, please do that. Some of these were by our sports management students, others we came up with, so just get involved with this because we want it to really be a panel discussion. I think we'll start with Ross Cimpl, and some of these questions are kind of right to the point, so this is a two-part question, Ross. What role do parents play in recruiting? And even at the college level, is there ever a time when you expect or believe a parent will contact you after a game?
Warming right up, aren't we? Okay. What role do parents play in recruiting? I guess I'll take the approach of kind of how we talk to parents. I think parents are critical in terms of the recruiting process, and what I mean by that is, for me, when we're recruiting kids, our conversation with parents has nothing to do with facilities, jerseys, helmets. It's really about their experience and what they're really going to actually be a part of in our program, whether that's financially, whether that's academically, what our plan is for them as a person. And so when we have visits, we have kids on our campus, we want their parents here because we want to have that blunt conversation. I know we got a couple of our players in here, and they, if you ask them, they would tell you, I think, that we're pretty blunt. But we want to be upfront, and we want parents to know what they're getting themselves involved with, what they're going to be involved with for the next 4 to 5 years. We want to know, what their student athletes are going to be involved with. And so I think from that standpoint, it's ultimately critical. We don't, and I'm going to use this term maybe lightly, we don't recruit parents. And what I mean by that is that we're not trying to win parents over. And I guess that's just maybe our approach, but it's more of giving clarity as to what we're doing, what we're a part of, and hopefully they see a value in that. And so from that standpoint, I do think parents are critical. I have never asked a parent how good their student athlete is. I don't ask that question, but I'm pretty sure what the answer would be, and that's what it should be. But that doesn't go into the scholarship process, I guess. Second part was, could you repeat the second question?
Sure.
After the game conversation?
That one, this could be for anyone, but at any time during your process, even at the college level, is there ever a time when you expect or believe a parent will contact you after a game?
Now that John's graduated, we haven't had too many issues with no. We actually, again, we're pretty blunt with our parents, and I think one of the best things that we do in our program is during fall camp, we'll invite all of our parents, and our host parents is something else that we do, but we have a big banquet in here, and there's about 300 people in here, and we kind of talk about the season and upcoming events that we have, and really kind of give a synopsis of what we think has happened so far in fall camp and whatever. But the other thing that we talk about is we have a presentation that we go through every single year. It's the same presentation. Some parents have seen the same one for 4 or 5 years, and one of the last slides that we talk about is, as coaches, we're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect, and we welcome any comments or constructive criticism, but never ever do it after a game, because there's something you're going to do or say that you're going to regret. There's something I'm going to do or say that we're going to regret. And so we have a policy, and I think our parents do a phenomenal job with this. Monday, noon, or anytime on Monday, give us a call if there's a question, if there's a concern. We have had a few calls in 9 years. I think I can count on one hand how many phone calls we've actually received with a legitimate concern. We did have one parent that called me every Monday, his son's senior year, because that's what he thought the presentation was about. He wanted us to call him. So he called me literally every Monday to talk about nothing besides the fact that he thought that's what the presentation was for, is to tell him to call us. So it's been really good, but we instruct our coaches. If there's an issue, we're never going to get involved. We're never going to do anything after a game. There's too many things, too many variables going on at that time for it to be beneficial. And so I think our parents have done a really good job with that. I think our coaches have done a good job with that. And that doesn't mean that we're not open to those conversations. It's just there's a better time.
Anyone add to that? Go ahead, if you guys have.
I was emailed once after a game. We went, it was early in my career here. We ran out of the gym at Sioux City. We were down 30 before we got out of the locker room, it felt like. And I pulled the plug on our best player early in the second half, and didn't play him because we had a game 2 days later. And I was like, I maybe pulled the plug too early, but I knew we were going to need him in the next game. When I got home at about 1 a.m., I had an email from the dad, and he said he just thought I singled him out. Why did he get benched? And I had completely benched him for the sake that he was our best player and we needed him the next time. So I emailed him back 2 minutes later and explained that to him, and he emailed me back 2 minutes after that. He goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Please don't tell him I emailed you." Like, so they, when you're contacting, I've always told parents in any kind of time, is it a good idea to ever contact the coach? The answer is always an absolute hard no. Never contact the coach when it's regarding performance or the sport. There's obviously times to contact a coach, but there's nothing productive going to come from talking to and emailing about performance relating to the sport.
Matt. Jason, did you have something?
I guess I've kind of been on both ends of it. I coached high school for 11 years, and then I've coached college here now for 10 years. At the high school level, I would always be very, at the beginning of the year, we would always sit down with our parents and just kind of let them know the expectations. And one of my expectations is I don't want to talk to you after the game. We need to wait 24 hours. Because like Dave was talking about, in today's world, they do worry about their kids and stuff. And I would talk to them, but I would never talk to them about playing time. And I just want to tell a quick story, because you were talking about earlier, Dave, about your book on how, let me do my job. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. Well, this is funny because I'm still good friends with this guy. He's a farmer, a very successful farmer in Mount Vernon. And my second year there, he came up to me and started telling me what I needed to do with his daughter and this and that. He might even be watching tonight, so this is good. I go up to him and I go, "John," I said, that's good that you're helping me out with basketball, but I got a couple things for you. I said, "Do you think I know what an ear of corn is?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Do you think I know what a soybean is?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Do you think I know what a tractor is?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "John, I don't know one goddamn thing about farming." And I said, "It's the same thing with basketball. I know you played it, and you played it a lot of years ago, but I don't think you know anything about our basketball program, what we do every day in practice and this and that. And I'm looking out what's best for your daughter, and these are the things we're doing." And that day was awesome for me because, John and I talked about it, and then John has kind of carried that on because his daughter is very young then every year. And I think a lot of times if you're very upfront with parents, especially at the high school level, and let them know these are the expectations and these is what we're going to do, I think it'll help a lot of, kids out here. I'm talking to you that want to be coaches. That's where you got to be. You can't expect parents to know. You got to let them know right away. This is how I want to run my program. These are the things that we need. These are expectations. So,
Wayne?
I'll give you one shot at this on things that you don't want to do or allow. When I was coaching, we had a chance for some of the parents would come into the locker room right after the game and listen to see what the coaches had to say. And we just had gotten beaten in a region final, and we finished the year 19-3. And the team that beat us in the region final had beat us one other time during the year. So 2 of our losses were to the same team. After the game, we had a young man who was a tremendously hard worker, but he just had a hard time scoring. But the great thing was that the kid that he was guarding wasn't going to score either. But late in the game, we were down 2 or 3 points, and I needed to score. I took him out. He started every game all year long. And we're in the locker room after the game, and you know how seniors are, a lot of kids are, coaches are the same way, you're down. Yet as a coach, I think you try to bring your players up. They're already down. You don't need to berate them. You don't need to say anything negative. So I went around and I congratulated every one of our players, and some of the parents were standing in the back, and one of the parents, and this is what you don't want to do, one of the parents raised his hand, which was not uncommon, and said, "Is it okay if I say something?" And I said, "Sure." Never expecting this. And he congratulated the kids. He said, "We're so proud of you as a community for what you've done, for the success you've had. Now, if we'd have just had a coach." And I looked at my assistant and I said, "What did he just say?" So you might want to be careful about letting anyone in the locker room. For you young people out there that are good at coach, you might not want to let anyone in the locker room until you are completely done and then don't even let them in.
Thanks, Wade. Dave?
I just wanted to add something. You know, I have so many coaches that are such good friends of mine. I've built up rapport with them through the years. And, you know, there's so many, I think Don Meyer, Mike Krzyzewski have basically said, you don't get into coaching to win games. You get into coaching to impact and build character in these young people that you're entrusted with. And there's a quote in the book, I just want to share it. It comes from Billy Graham. And he said, a coach will impact more people in 1 year than the average person will in an entire lifetime. Let that sink in for a minute. So if you're going into coaching, you guys understand the significant role that you play. And you're dealing with impressionable people, and your impact is going to have lifelong impressions on them. And again, it can't be all about winning and losing. There are so many more things to it than that. So if you are fortunate to be a coach, and I admire coaches, I don't know why anybody sometimes wants to be a coach with all the long hours and little pay and all of that, dealing with the media and the parents and all of that, but I applaud people who go into coaching. And, you know, again, the most successful coaches that I've interviewed, some of the all-time greats, I ask them what's their most meaningful coaching experience, and hardly any of them will talk about a state championship season. They'll talk about a team where they had marginal talent, and the kids worked together, and they reached their full potential, and they came together as a team.
Okay, my next question is for Clay. Clay, how do you as a coach interact with parents during the beginning of the recruiting process? And you can when I say beginning, the first start of the recruiting process, how do you interact with parents?
Okay, so my first interaction with parents more so is on the recruiting trail. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the NCAA and the NAIA, player contact coaches rules. I think for us in NAIA, I think one of the benefits of us is the contact rule, whereby if I was to go on a college showcase, watch a soccer game, I can contact the player and the parents. I can talk to them, have a conversation with them right after the game. Unlike NCAA, which have really strict contact rules, I think that was one of the benefits for us. So when I go to a college showcase and I watching a game, after the game, I look for the interaction between the player and the parents. And I remember this one instance, I was in Kansas, and I normally go and introduce myself after the game, and I was waiting, and this player, really, really awesome player on the field, really interested, great grades. So my intention was to talk to them after the game. And game ended up, they're walking across. Mind you, the coaches always sit on the opposite side of the parents. So after the game, I'm watching, keeping an eye on the player to see where direction they're going to, because I want to talk to them. And the player was walking out, going, and mom and dad meet up with them, heading to the parking lot. So I'm racing, trying to catch up with her. And as I get closer to her, she dropped her backpack on the ground with all the soccer stuff, and she told me, "Mom, pick my bag up and bring it." And right away, I made a U-turn, and I just head right back. You know, because, you know, for us, we talk a lot about, you know, when we sign a kid, we always say, "Hey, welcome to the family. You know, welcome to the Tiger family." And I think one of the benefits for us in the play NAI is that, especially for me, is that we try to connect with the family before they get here on campus. And more so, you should just get a feel for that connection, if they're going to be a good fit for the program. And that was a red flag for me. So for for me, a lot of time on the recruiting trip, I get to see a lot of red flags before they even come to campus. Whereby, they come on campus, you might be able to see those signs. And I've been here for 7 years now, and I haven't, anticipating I'm not going to get any next year, but I haven't received an email or a phone call as to a parent questioning or asking me as to why the daughter is not playing much, or why the daughter is not playing. Also, I think I look at the process from where I watch them play, interact with the parents. My next interaction with the parent is probably during the course of a game or after a game. So after each game, home and away, we do a parent potluck, whereby every game a parent nominate to do the potluck, different type of foods, and we're going to meet we play at the Pepsi soccer complex, and we're going to meet and the parents and all the girls in the meet, and we talk, and during that time, I interact with parents, find out how they're doing, jobs, and it's never a conversation about, hey, why my daughter didn't play, or why this or why that. So I think, for me, establishing that relationship whereby the parent don't feel the need to email me, to give that burden, dependency on the daughter.
Thanks, Clay. Amy?
Okay, I'm going to ask a question from a little bit different angle. So I know you guys don't get those calls. Sometimes I do. But the question I'm asking is from a parenting perspective. So I'm interested in your parenting perspective on this. I spend probably 2/3 of my weekends in any given year all over the state watching young 5th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, and high school students compete. And there are a lot of occasions when I'm sitting next to a parent who I'm frankly really uncomfortable with. I'm uncomfortable about their behaviors, about how they're addressing their young person, especially when they're in those elementary years. And 2 weekends ago, or 3 weekends ago, I was in Brookings, and I actually was so uncomfortable that I had to go, and I just had to say to the young parents that were really verbally harassing their children who were on the court, I just need you to stop. Because it was clearly making almost everyone around them uncomfortable. And so I'm just interested in your strategy, because occasionally we have a college parent who's in the stands, or a fan who's just uncomfortable by their language, by their behavior, and as an administrator, that's a challenge for me. But as a parent, it's hard for me to see someone so berated over this activity. And so I think there's tremendous benefits that come from athletics, but I'm just interested in, how do you handle, as a parent, parent to parent, is there an opportunity, is there a strategy? How do we encourage or diffuse what sometimes really gets out of hand?
How that went after you said that.
Not so well. But she did remove herself from the bleachers. And I walked out and I said, he's playing a great game. It's really hard for us to understand and to coach our young people from the sidelines, especially this is indoor soccer. I mean, you can't joystick people around the court, much like you probably can't joystick basketball, right? And she just looked at me and she goes, you have no business telling me what to do. And I said, I might not, and I might have been out of line, but I said, I'm really uncomfortable with what you're saying to your son. And I kind of walked the other way.
My experience, I'm closely approaching as much time coaching college as I did spending time in the youth side of it with that. And we were really proactive in our program with that, where we brought parents in beforehand, every team, and not every team does that. But hey, this is the expectations were laid out. This is what this is going to look like. And it was amazing how many parents came back and had been a part of another team, and under our guidelines, like we were like, you're not going to yell at officials, you're not going to do this, and we would get reports back. I would email parents and let them know. Obviously, me not being a parent helped, like it was unbiased. But the amount of parents that don't realize what they're doing, like that, they don't realize how obnoxious they're being. The parents that we worked with that were a part of other teams would go and they would look and they go, well, now that we're doing it this way, we can't believe how ridiculous we were and embarrassing we were. And I often say this about, with athletes and parents. The athletes, we get to practice every day. We go through game situations every single day. The parents only get the games. I think millions of dollars could be made being a consultant and putting parents through real life situations where they sign up for it, because they actually, once you get it, all of this stuff makes perfect sense sitting here in a forum to not do this, this, and this until that situation is thrown at you. And the only way to combat it is proactiveness. The only way to combat it is proactiveness, and letting people know this is how we got to be and this is how this has got to go before the situation arises. But from parent to parent, I would assume that's exactly how that situation is going to go, because the people that are acting that way have no care for the fact that they're acting that way. Logical people understand they're being an idiot when they're being an idiot, and the people that are overcome with emotion, that's tough. I applaud you for saying something, because I would have guessed that was going to go exactly how you said it. But it's tough because parents aren't in those situations until they're exactly in those situations, and it's really tough.
I guess, Amy, I've been in similar situations like you. I'll be in a crowd recruiting a kid, sitting there, and I have parents around me, and this just happened last year, and they're just bashing the coach. And I'm upset now, and I'm still supposed to be representing Dakota Wesleyan. I got my DWU stuff on, and these parents are just all over this coach. So finally, I just said, my wife's with me too. Of course, my wife, I drive her nuts sometimes, and I just look at him and I said, do you think this coach is really coming here trying to lose this game? Do you really think their game plan today was, I'm going to lose this game, I'm going to run this defense, or I'm going to do this or do that? And it was amazing when I did say that. They turned around, they looked at me, and first of all, I caught them all off guard, and they were just bashing this coach. I felt bad for the coach, and then the one mother later on, I got an email, I still have the email 2 days later, and they thanked me. She thanked me, and I don't know which one it was or whatever, but sometimes, and I think the comment she made, sometimes we look through rose-colored glasses or something and this and that, and it's true. I mean, I have kids right now, and it's hard for me too, when you're coaching your kids and things, but you got to sit back sometimes and realize why you're doing it. And I just, if you're ever in a crowd, I just don't think a coach ever goes out there and tries to lose a game,
Being a sports parent is tough. It is a challenge. And I'm not trying to condone the actions of the parents, but I can't tell you how many people that I've known in the community, when I say community, I mean the area, nicest people. And on game night, it's like you don't even know them. I mean, it's like a switch flips on, and they become this cynical, obnoxious, win-at-all-cost person, and you look at them and you're like, who are you, And that's one of the reasons that the book is called The Parent Trapped Within. It really has dual meanings. Part of it is you're a parent trapped inside yourself, and you really don't know how to handle it. And you want so hard for your son or your daughter to experience success and to be the star player and to do everything right. And yet, when you try to encourage them, criticism comes out and all of that. And the other part of the parent trapped within is, again, I've known the nicest people, and all of a sudden their son or daughter gets involved in competitive, organized extracurricular activities, and all of a sudden you don't want to be around them for 4 years. And then when their daughter or son graduates, they go right back to being the nice person again. They're trapped within the system of organized extracurricular activities, and they don't know how to handle it. They get caught up in the heat of the moment, and and it's happened to me. It happened to me when I was writing the book. I should know better. And yet, when your offspring is out there, there's just something that kind of takes over. But again, if you can recognize that, it's not going to cure it, but if you can recognize it before it happens, that's half the battle. And I actually had a person tell me that read the book, they said, my goal is to not be a part of your next book. Well, okay, the message has been sent, you've received it, there's a correlation there. That to me was a compliment. Now at least you're aware of the potential problems so that you don't, you might still make mistakes, but at least you know ahead of time what to look out for.
I think it's difficult in your situation, in what I call the traveling teams, the 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. Byron Utter was a great coach up at Mobridge, and when he ran little kids tournaments on weekends, he would come out before every game, and he'd say, welcome to Mobridge, blah, blah, blah. Here's our expectations. If you are being discourteous, rude, I'm going to walk up to you and I'm going to hand you a popsicle stick with a piece of yellow paper on the end of it. I'm not going to say anything to you, but that's your warning. If it happens again, I'm going to come up with a popsicle stick with a piece of red paper on it. That means you're gone and you're not coming back. So he didn't make a spectacle out of it, but he let everybody know right away what the expectations were. When I started working camps, I was fortunate enough to work with Coach Jon Hart, who was at Washington High at the time. And we're driving around in the morning, drinking a cup of coffee before camp started. He said, you know where the 2 best places to coach are? And I know everybody up here knows where they are. And I just figured, well, Hamlin, and that's where I was at, in Sioux Falls, Washington. How rude and discourteous she was, and how offended I am as the wife of the coach. And so after a while, she just turned around and walked away, our daughter. Well, later on, this lady came back and apologized to her. So I think we can't be afraid to confront people. They say what you permit, you promote. And if you're going to permit that kind of behavior in your gym or your football field or your track, then it's nobody's fault but your own. In the Activities Association, in the Constitution and bylaws, this specifically states at every home event, you should have an administrator present. And that administrator is to take care of any problems in the crowd. That's their job. When you travel, you should have someone designated as the game administrator for your school. So if I come to Hanson High, Jim shouldn't have to be in charge of my crowd. I'll call him and say, Jim, we're coming to your place tonight. I can't be there. I've got an event at my school. But Jon Hart, one of our parents, he'll be there. He will be in charge. He'll introduce himself to you. And if you have any problems with anybody from our school, you contact him and he'll take care of it. But those are the expectations that you give. And that's what was kind of disappointing to me at times when I was in the Activities Association, to see that kind of behavior at a state event. That tells me you've permitted it all year long in your gym. Because people just don't come to a state tournament, rational people, and all of a sudden just fall off the deep end at a state tournament. They've probably fallen off the deep end all year long. So if you permit it all year long, then you're promoting it. And you're going to see the same kind of behavior at a state event.
Okay, we'll move on to one more question. John, as an administrator, have policies changed in your tenure at regard to DWU in parenting? And how do you handle a hostile environment of parents or fans in general at home DWU events?
Well, I think administratively on campus here, I don't think there's been a ton of policy changed over the time that I've been here. Obviously, being at a college, you know, we treat your sons and daughters and our kids like they're adults, you know. So once they're 18, you know, there's a lot of things that we can't involve parents with at that point in time. So I feel like we treat our kids as adults from the get-go once they get to college, and I think each one of these coaches probably have their own policies in relation to parents and those kind of things. But I know that one of the biggest things that each one of these coaches will tell you is I think number one on their list is we're not going to talk to parents about playing time. And that's something between them and the student athlete. I think that's pretty high on the list for every one of these guys. But that would be my short answer, probably from the policy side. Is we treat our student athletes and our students like they're adults. And once they reach the point of 18, they are adults. So there's a lot of things that we really limit ourselves with in relation to with their parents. So that's kind of my answer on that one. And then, I think Wayne kind of hit the nail on the head as far as, hostile environments, whether they're at the Corn Palace or Joe Quintenel. Amy brought up a good point on how uncomfortable that probably is parent to parent, but as an administrator, it's a lot easier for me to approach that individual that's kind of acting out of control at that time. And Wayne, gave a pretty good scenario there of how to kind of de-escalate those situations. You start off with just a pretty simple conversation or a simple comment, and if that doesn't, if they don't take the hint after that, you take it to the next level, and that's probably kicking them or removing them out of the facility if they're causing problems, if they're causing a hostile environment for players, those kind of things. So all that stuff's kind of evaluated on a case-by-case basis, I feel like, but I think Wayne said it best by just, you try to deal with it right away. And if you're having those instances, you're having those occurrences, as you try to deal with it probably as discreetly as possible. And if that's not happening, you kind of you take it to the next step and get them out of there. Whether that's you or law enforcement, whatever it may be, we've dealt with that in the past and at all of our facilities. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about kind of your policies or maybe your guidelines for your parents, kind of right from the get-go. I mentioned number one being playing time. That's just not a discussion that you have with parents.
In our first team meeting, this goes to our kids right away, and then we send it out to our parents after that in a simple email. We just have a simple slide on our PowerPoint that says, here's the line of communication in our program, and it's coach, player, parent, and I say it, I know that I've got a couple guys that have been in this meeting, I say that about 100 times, coach, player, parent, player, coach, and we just hammer that home, and that's where it's at. Now, there's times where parents need to get a hold of us about things, but regarding where they're at in our program, that is an absolutely no-go zone. I'm just not interested in hearing anything about it, especially when we're spending as much time with them and they're spending as little time with them regarding our sport.
Go ahead, Ross.
I was just gonna, so we have a very, very similar conversation with our guys, but we also tell parents that we're willing to listen to any issue, but you're going to be willing to listen to everything that's actually happening then. And what we mean by that is, and I can count on one hand in 9 years how many phone calls or emails I've gotten about a player or playing time or whatever, which I think is pretty good. But we also tell our parents, hey, if you have an issue or a complaint, we have no problem listening to it, but we're going to also tell our side of it. And that's the part that we really need to figure out. And in that same conversation, we say, hey, okay, you have a concern or a comment. If you want to know all the information from a coach's perspective, you might want to talk to Junior about it first. You might want to just find out and piece any of the gaps. And then if there's still an issue, then yep, I have no problem talking to you about it and whatever else. But usually when we take that approach of being available, but also you're going to hear about what's going on in the study table. You're going to hear about what's going on in practice. You're going to hear about, the different things that we do keep track of. You're going to have to listen to that too. And if you want to make sure you get the whole picture, you might want to talk to Junior and find out exactly what's going on before you come to me because, and so I guess we've had a pretty good success rate with that as well.
I was just going to say, I recently talked to a school official, and I think every school has their own policy. I don't think there's one that's necessarily a standard one. And he told me of a situation where one of their coaches received an anonymous letter and reported it to the administration. And he told me that they got in front of a group of, they think it was a parent, they don't know for sure because it was anonymous, but they let it be known that if they found out who did that, it would be an automatic 2-week suspension from coming to any games, because that kind of action will not be tolerated.
Going down a little different avenue, and Dave, you brought this up in your opening, but Jason, I'd like to address this to you first, because we see this and we've seen it for a lot of years now. Could you give us your thoughts on pros and cons of recruiting multi-sport athletes, and specifically parents at a very young age pushing their children, maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, to one sport, and they've made up their mind that athlete is going to be a soccer player, that athlete's going to be a basketball player. What's your thoughts on that, Jason?
Well, in the 10 years that I've been here, what I've noticed on the girls' side, the kids that are multi-sport athletes seem to stick with the game of basketball all 4 years. The ones that have just specialized in it and played basketball their whole life or from junior high on and didn't play any other sports, a lot of times burned out a lot quicker. And I don't know if that's the same for other sports or whatever. That's just my sport. You know, I have a 6th grade son and I have a sophomore daughter. And my son plays baseball, basketball, golf. You know, I hope he continues to do all those things. And he's younger right now, but I'm fighting the issue with my daughter right now. She's a basketball player, volleyball player, and she did do track. And she didn't do track last year. But on one, and I'm not knocking volleyball because every sport has this situation where you can do camps, you can do individual workouts. But they have spring volleyball, they have summer volleyball, and so she chose not to do track because she tells me she's too busy with volleyball, and she really likes volleyball. That's her favorite sport. But I think the way society works, the way coaching, you know, works, I think we've made it tough on kids. Not, you know, I think we have. I really do, you know, as far as having them specialize. Like my daughter, do I sign her up for spring volleyball? Of course I do. Do I sign her up for summer volleyball? Of course I do. Does she play volleyball 9 months out of the year? Yeah, she does. And does she play as much basketball? No, she doesn't. You know, she's going to Nebraska to a camp this year. We've already got her signed up. Did I sign her for a basketball camp? Yep. No, I haven't. But that's our mindset sometimes. And I think she would have stayed in track and she would have did those things if she would have been growing up like I did in 1990 to 94. I didn't have those things, Curt. I mean, we went from basketball to, you know, track to baseball to football. We didn't have teen camps back then, you know, a ton of them. They were just getting started. We didn't have Tibbs workouts back then, you know, things like that. And you just went from sport to sport to sport. So I think that's where we've kind of lost it. I do not agree with specialization. I know some coaches might, but I don't. I think kids, I just think you get a chance. Like if you run track, for instance, and when I was in Mount Vernon, I always pushed my girls to run track. You get on that 100-meter dash, you're by yourself. You know, it's a different feeling. It's a different way to get motivated. I just think it makes you a better person, a more well-rounded person when you're doing different sports and being coached by different people. But I don't know how to change that. I know you and I talked about the other day, and I'm going through it at my house right now, and I just don't know how to change it because we want, as parents, what's best for our kids, and we do, you know, and I guess that's where I'm at.
Well, this is kind of a topic that I've always been pretty passionate about just because I was involved in a lot of different things in high school, not even just athletically, but just, you know, in the fine art stuff, is just making time for those things. And Jason brought up a really good point. You know, it's getting harder and harder to be seasonal because there's so many things year-round that are happening in a particular sports, which kind of discourages that from you know being involved in everything. But I mean, when I was in high school, you know, every coach supported the other coach, you know, and you run into that a little bit too, where a lot of coaches maybe get selfish in one area and try to maybe influence the athlete to go another way. But you know, our football coach in Hanson High School was just adamant that you're in track. And when I was going to high school, it wasn't even really an option. That didn't even cross your mind that, hey, I'm not going to go out for track. It was because it wasn't really an option. It was something that every coach encouraged you to do, and you just felt like you had to do it. And there's a lot of athletes right now at the high school level that are really good athletes, and they're maybe letting their other, you know, classmates down by not going out for other sports and those kind of things. You know, I hated track. I absolutely hated track, but it was one of those things where, hey, I didn't go out. I'm letting, you know, probably 10 other guys down if I'm not going out. And looking back, you know, we won multiple state titles in football and track and those kind of things in high school. And maybe that wasn't possible if I didn't go out or another guy didn't go out. And at that point in time, it didn't even cross your mind that, hey, track isn't optional or not. Like, you're going out. Like track season comes around, that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be golfing. You're going to be running in track. You're going to be playing baseball. So that was my experience with it. And as much as I hated track, to this day, it was something I'll never regret doing. You know, looking back, I'm so glad I did it, and I was so glad that I had that experience. But as Jason mentioned too, there's a lot of things going on throughout the year that maybe discourage that. But I'm strong on being involved in everything you can be in high school.
I also
Go ahead.
I also coach U11 girls soccer team in Sioux Falls, and I have players that is actively involved in 3 sports right now: basketball, soccer, and volleyball. Right now at U11s, and I'm pro. I'm all about multi-sport athletes. During my parent meeting, I let the parents know that, hey, it's fine to do that, but what is the expectation? So I'll be very clear with them with the expectation. So what I do, I have Shutterfly. Let's say I pick 10 events to go to attend to the year as a team, and I have availability. I have 37 players rostered, and parents have the opportunity to go on that website and click on whatever availability they'll be available for that particular weekend. And I'll be very straight with them. I was like, well, if you decide to do basketball and take the whole winter off, don't tick and say that you're going to come to these events in the winter, knowingly you didn't come to any practice. You're not getting better. I think you're doing injustice to the rest of your teammates. And I asked the parents, okay, by your daughter not coming to practice, what are we showcasing? Are we showcasing their ability or their inability? So I think, yes, we can have multi-sport athletes, but know that it have to have an expectation. You can only get better by doing something more, not less. You can only get something better by doing more, not less. So right up in my parent meeting, I'd be very straight up with them. I was like, hey, yes, you can play a volleyball, you can play a basketball, you can do all of this stuff, but know that if your daughter is not coming to so many practice a week, at the end of the day, you will not get better. And I probably wouldn't choose you to go on a team for a tournament. So I think there have to be an expectation too as well.
You know, what you mentioned is really, excuse me, a lot tougher in small schools where there's a limited amount of athletes to go around. And I've seen volleyball coaches and girls basketball coaches kind of come at odds in the summertime when they both want the same kid at the same time. And what are you going to do with that? But to piggyback off of what Jon said, you know, again, there are so many valuable lessons when it comes to extracurricular activities and the leadership that somebody can display. Might be a standout football player, maybe marginal track athlete, but guess what? The work ethic, the leadership, all of those things carry over, and now they're making the team better just by being in the locker room. I don't know if you guys remember Logan Storley. Logan was a phenomenal wrestler. In fact, he won the Hodge Award, which goes to the top wrestler in the country. There's only one of them, and he won it. All classes. His senior year, and prior to that as well, he played football for Webster. And Webster was not very good. And he was getting gang tackled on almost every play. Risk for injury was pretty significant. And yet he did it because he's playing with his buddies. He's representing his team. And you know what? Didn't hurt his wrestling one bit. Already had a scholarship to the University of Minnesota, all signed, sealed, and delivered, and he still played football anyway. And you know what? He won 6 state championships in high school, all the way through. And yet, multiple sports didn't hurt him a bit.
Matt, this is a question from one of our sports management students. Have you ever not recruited an athlete because of parents? Don't be specific.
Well, going out and watching, we watch parents all the time. I'm really lucky in my program. We have really good parents. We always have, and the majority of parents are really good. It happened once. We were prepared to offer a kid a lot of money to come here, and I just happened to be standing in the wrong place, and luckily the right place, as it turned out. I go to the game and watch, and I didn't have a seat. It was packed. So I'm standing in front of a water cooler and off to the corner, and a guy's just screaming and yelling the whole game. I mean, just screaming and yelling at officials, at players, at his kid, at the coach. And I had seen him before at games, but I'd never been close enough to hear anything. And so I see this, and I'm standing there, and I look back, and it was this kid's dad. And I went, oh, boy. And so as the game went on, I tell you, okay. After the game, talked to a couple of parents that are from the same school, and, hey, is this normal behavior? And, yeah, it's every game. We were done. That was it. I'm like, we have enough issues with our kids where we want to keep them moving in the right direction, and Clay brought up red flags in recruiting. Red flags in recruiting turn into issues on campus. And we're trying to avoid those. We're not 100%. And if we're going to deal with red flags, you better be really, really, really good if we're going to take that chance. And if it's not at that level, then we just have to move on because we have our choice in that. We have enough things to worry about day in and day out without bringing in a known issue. So absolutely, and I think I can speak for a lot of college coaches because we talk about it a lot. Watching parents is a big deal, and you definitely can hurt your kids' recruitment based on how you are in public with things, because that's a real issue. Now, everybody, we understand in competition, just like all of us, things get heated. So we're not talking about any little thing. We're talking about major behavioral issues that we're going, well, we're not going to deal with that, because if you're willing to do that during a game, you're going to be willing to do a lot more as real issues come up, because you're talking about watching kids who are playing every minute of every game. They're playing, they're getting the ball, they're the leading scorer, and you're like this? Oof. I can't imagine what you're going to be like when I'm not playing him. So, absolutely, it's an issue.
I think it comes back to what I said before. That parent didn't go off just that night at just that time. They've been going off all year long. Ever since this young person was probably a freshman in high school, or maybe even younger than that. So what you permit, you promote. I have no idea where this young person was. It doesn't make any difference. But that type of behavior is what we're talking about in David's book here, the parent. They're trying to live their life through either their son or daughter. And I think that is just a couple quick comments on the multi-sport. I think it's great when kids are willing to accept coaching from more than one coach. If you were to play basketball here at Dakota Wesleyan for either one of these gentlemen, you better be ready to take it and throwing a coat off and ripping my tie off and all that kind of good stuff. But then maybe you go out for golf or track, and the coach is really laid back, and they're talking nice to you, and everything's great. I think it's important that kids can take that kind of coaching from multiple sports, or from multiple coaches rather than just one. I think there's less stress, and Dave mentioned this, about the overuse injuries. If the kids are out for multiple sports, they're running on grass maybe, then they're running on a hardwood floor, and then they're doing this and that on different surfaces. I think that's great. I think they're better apt at accepting different roles on the team. Maybe on the basketball team, I'm the star. Maybe on the volleyball team, I'm that, I shouldn't say just, maybe I'm that 10th player or 12th player. Maybe on the golf team, you know, I'm on there because they need 4 people and I'm number 4. You know, but that's great. I think there's more social contact with your school teammates. And I think that's important. But I will say this, since we went to the combined volleyball tournament and combined wrestling tournament, it's fun to watch these kids, especially at a volleyball tournament. You have 3 classes there. They're cheering for teams that aren't even in their class because they traveled with those kids during the year in JO volleyball or a traveling team in basketball. The wrestlers, Class AA or Class A and B, these kids compete against each other all the time. And then to bring them into a state tournament where they can watch all their friends wrestle at that same time, that's a great atmosphere. It's a great camaraderie, not only between the athletes, but between the coaches as well.
Okay, actually, Wayne, this question's for you too. You've been around a long time. Dealing with parents at the high school events, and you know, a lot of us tonight has been on college events, but dealing with parents on the high school events during your many years at South Dakota Activity Station, have you ever had to change, and I know the answer to this, but have you ever had to change any of your policies due to parents during or after events?
You know, not necessarily with parents. I'll be honest with you there. Our handbook, you know, the original handbook in 1905 is about this thick, and it's about this wide and about this tall. The one we have now, and Curt knows this, it's about this thick. It's a 3-ring binder, and the thing just continues to grow. But it's not necessarily, like Dave said, most schools don't have a common blueprint for handling issues with parents. Well, we have common things is academic issues and transfer rules. Those 2 things, and you know, it just seems like every year you think you've got this rule covered, a transfer rule or an open enrollment rule, you think you've got it covered, and by golly, somebody finds a way to get around that rule, so the next year you adopt another rule. And it just continues to grow. And for whatever reason, parents, I really don't think that coaches recruit at the high school level. I believe parents recruit. That during the summer or during these times when they see their kids play, they say, you know, John would sure look good in orange and black versus the blue and white. And pretty soon the parents start thinking about that, and all of a sudden now we have a rule that does not allow John to be in 3 different schools in 3 different years. And believe it or not, that's what we've had. We had a young person, 4 schools, 4 years. And we finally made this young person eligible, but his parent had to move to that community. Because he had moved to that community to live with a girlfriend's family. It was just a mess. But to answer your question, to deal with parents, no. But to deal with the academic rule and the transfer rules, those types of things, every year there's a new rule that has to go into place.
Okay.
And you probably adopted some of those.
Yeah. Questions from the audience that we're missing here? Okay. Sports management students? John? John?
Now, I have, you know, everything we've talked about in high school and college have policies, right? I mean, you guys have policies at college and high school and all that. But when you say these people don't get this way overnight, well, they're getting this way probably from the youth athletics or traveling athletics where really there is no policy, right? You know, back when I was a kid, growing in Rapid, we had Little League Baseball, you know, and everybody did Little League Baseball. And then as things go by, you get AAA baseball, this kind of baseball. And I ask people, why did you get out of Little League Baseball? Or why don't your kids? Well, you've seen the book for that Little League Baseball? It's this policy is so big. We don't want to follow that policy. So they find there are other ways around. Nonetheless, these youth sports, I was reffing a state youth wrestling tournament about 3 years ago, and one of the guys I ref high school with goes, "Man, did you see all those people outside? We're harvesting youth." And he said, we're harvesting. When are we going to stop harvesting our youth? And I thought about that for a while. I was like, what does he talk about? Well, you go out there, and there's 6,000 people at this youth event, and some of these coaches there are just parents, and they're telling me and these guys that ref high school sports, which the coaches in high school sports are great, and then we have to deal with all this, and that starts from the bottom. So like Matt said, when are we going to figure out how to, entrepreneur-wise, parenting these parents for these youth sports? And I see it in baseball tournaments, but you don't have, not everybody's like Matt that sits there and has this policy and understands the whole purpose of it. You get these dads out there that have this other thing. I mean, when are we going to address youth sports with young people and young families that we're seeing every weekend here?
I'll be truthful with you, John. I don't know if we ever will. That's a very negative question, an answer to your question. And it's not the kind of answer that I would like to give you, but we've got twin grandsons that are in 3rd grade. Okay? So we go to these events, and we watch the behavior, and it is appalling at times, and nobody does anything about it. And so again, what you promote, and I think it's going to be incumbent upon, I see a lot of young people sitting back here and around the audience, it's going to be incumbent upon you, when you get your turn to comes around to be that parent trapped, that you step out of that trap. And it's difficult. And now as a grandparent, I see maybe a couple of people out there that are grandparents. You have that same opportunity. The question is, will you take that opportunity? Or will you just get up and walk away and shake your head and say, oh, that's terrible? I mean, it comes back to plain and simple, that is we are going to have to step up and say, enough's enough. And Jason was spot on. He talking 90 to 94. Well, I started coaching in 1970 in a school that only had 2 sports because the girls didn't have anything at that time. And we had cross country, we had basketball and track. That's all we had. But what is interesting today, and we haven't even talked about this yet, everything we've done so far has been based on athletics. You want to get into an environment that's very rich and positive, you just need to go to an all-state chorus and orchestra concert. You need to go to a state one-act play festival. You need to go to those fine arts events that John was a participant of and see, and I think one of the reasons it's so positive is there's no one there with a black and white striped shirt and a whistle around their neck. Nobody. Everybody gets to play. Everybody's happy. The kids, the State One Act Play Festival at O'Gorman last weekend, I went over and sat for 3 days, maybe 2-3 hours at a time. And I know Curt attended those events when he was on the Activities Association Board of Directors. And I might throw this in at this time. One of the best members that I had in my 16 years, and I had a lot of good ones, but he's maybe one of the best. But anyway, I digress a minute. The fine arts events, I think you really need to get involved in. Encourage your kids to become multi-activity students. That's why South Dakota High School Activities Association. We're not an athletic association. So you really want to see a good positive environment, a lot of positive strokes, kids feeling good about themselves. Try to get involved in some of our performing arts activities at the Activities Association level.
I think we'll just start down. Clay, do you want anything to add to our discussion tonight? We're kind of start to wrap it up here. Do you have anything you want to add?
First off, thank you guys for coming. It's cold outside, and for me, most of you guys might not know this, but I've been living in the States now for 20 years. Originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. So, for me, it's continue to adjust. My family back home said now that I'm all Americanized now, but it's constantly adjusting to the environment I am now and, living up here for 20 years. And I say that because, growing up, your parents, it used to be where, you guys probably familiar with this term, it takes a village to raise a kid, to raise a child. And I say that because, growing up in Trinidad, it wasn't just my parents or my coach, it was my neighbors, everybody, challenging me, to get better. My pastor, the fireman, the policeman, everybody, And I come up here and it's, as I said, I coach a U11 girls team, and 2 weeks ago, I was having a parent meeting, and the dad, it was myself, the dad, and the U10 daughter, and we're doing a player evaluation. And I'm talking to the player and, just going over some of the stuff that she's been doing great, really excellent, and some of the stuff that we can make improvements on. And very vividly, the dad visually just, pointing on his daughter and then pointing back to me every time I made him point, just to kind of get verification of, hey, see, I told you that. I told you that. So for me, I don't know if he felt a sense of insecurity or trust that I can coach his daughter and nobody else that he can probably coach her. So kind of going away from that environment where, hey, let the community, let the family raise the kid up. So I think we all got a part and role to play in securing, helping each other reach their true potential.
Ross?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to just kind of mention about what John was saying in terms of youth sports, one thing that really hasn't been talked about at all is money, and the fact that there are so many people right now that are trained to train your student athlete. I have an academy, I have and Coach Wilber, I'm not bashing here, but, so what happens is you want to help your kid out, so you're going to pay somebody money to train them. Well, and if you're invested in that, and then what's the trainer's job? His job is to tell you that, hey, if your kid wants to get a scholarship, if they want to start, their job is to get more training sessions in. And I'm seeing this just from a football standpoint a little bit more. There's not a lot of traveling football teams and whatever else, but it's becoming more popular. And my big thing is like, there's nothing that you can't learn from a high school coach. And that's one thing that, we talked about going from season to season. I think that's probably the only benefit or the only thing that we could go back to that would eliminate some of these issues. And the fact of, okay, this season, right now we have 5 kids on our roster that are dual sport kids. Right now, from January until whenever it is, they have not done one workout with football. They've done track workouts this entire time. My son, who will come here next year, will play baseball all spring. I won't see him, which is maybe a good thing for him and for me. But next year we'll have close to 10 kids on our roster that are playing football in the fall and track or baseball in the spring. And is that going to limit their ability in terms of football and playing time, whatever else? Maybe. Maybe not. But they have an opportunity to do that here, and I think we need to provide that. And so I guess I'm a little negative on the trainers right now, or these specialized people that are really pushing, hey, if your kid wants to get a scholarship, you got to get them started early. Well, now as a parent, you've given that person money, now you want to see results. And this whole cycle goes back and forth, and to me, it's like, hey, play your sport during your season, and then you're done with that. And ideally, that would be what I would suggest. But you know, people got to make money, people got to build buildings, and it doesn't quite happen that way sometimes.
Jason?
I also want to thank you for having me. You know, I guess I enjoyed being here. The thing that I would say to parents that, and I've had to work on it, we just had a youth tournament. Matt put it on. Matt's assistant Jacob was refereeing. We got beat by a foul that, you know, I didn't agree with the call. I'm coaching, and they called a foul, and they went to the free throw line, made free throws. We got beat, and I got a son that's really upset, you know, and of course I was a little upset too afterwards, and I did. I told my wife, I didn't think, you know, because I did say something to the other official. I just said, you know, you missed that one. But in the end, it's, what is it, sixth grade basketball. You know, and I still learn too. I still learn from things too as parents, though, you know, afterwards, you got to put things in perspective. It is a sixth grade tournament. It's at DWU. I don't think they'll ever look back in the record books and say that Matt Wilber's tournament, we got second. I don't think nobody will remember that. But those are things that, you know, like Dave says, he's done it too, I've done it, and you got to just kind of put things in perspective. And the last thing I want to say is I do talk about my sophomore daughter now. She's going through the whole high school experience. And one thing I've learned, and it was from Coach Don Meyer, when he came and spoke at our church one time, he said, you know, when your kids come through the door as parents, don't get on them about how bad they played or this or that. So the first thing I tell Caitlin now when she comes through the door, I says, how you doing? And then we just go from there. And the other thing you got to do is, and it's hard for me, trust me, but is just listen, you know. Because a lot of times they just want to talk about it and ask them how they're doing and go from there. I think that it does. Because those kids, when they're playing, trust me, they know what they did wrong a lot of times. And I know as a coach and as a parent, that coach is telling them what they did wrong, so they don't really need to hear it from you again when you get home. So, but thank you.
Yeah. I'll skip over Dave because you're going to come up and finish here. But Matt, why don't you go next?
I don't have much.
Okay.
Appreciate being up here. I do think parents, you know, they get a really bad rap. It's tough. Parents have a major role, you know, and it was brought up. You go through the youth side of it where you might be organizing it, you might be helping, you're financially pushing it forward. But it's you got to constantly remind yourself where your role's at. You're not the coach, you're not the player. And something was said that was really big here, and it's for me as a coach too. You can't care more than your kid does. I can't care more about basketball than our players do. They've got to want to do all that stuff, and from there you can provide the avenue to it. But if the kid isn't interested, pushing them forward isn't going to do anything good that way. Understand where your role's at and excel in that role. We tell our players that all the time. Parents can do that. Parents are the front door to teamwork. Parents are the front door. You are the biggest voice that your kids are going to hear right away about what's important in sports. And as coaches, as a college coach, I'm lucky because they don't go home and sleep in their parents' house. They hear me. In high school and in the youth side, that's where they go. And if you're talking about teammates and teamwork and doing your best and doing that stuff's going to resonate with your kids. If you're talking about the coaches and what the teammates did wrong and all the things that are going on, that's going to resonate with your kids too. And be very conscious of the messages you're sending to your son or daughter, because that's going to be reflected on how they're performing with their team and how they're acting towards their team.
Just real quickly, when I was in the office in Pierre, we had a gentleman that would go out to different communities and talk to parent groups. And one of the things he always used to tell them is, consider a sphere and then divide it into 4 chunks. And within those 4 spheres, everybody sitting in this room tonight is going to fall into one of those spheres. You're either going to be a player, and I'm assuming we have some either high school players or collegiate players sitting here tonight. We got coaches. I know we've got some coaches sitting in the room. We've got fans sitting in the room. And maybe we've got some officials sitting in the room. So in every game, there's those 4 spheres. If everybody stays within their sphere, you're going to have a wonderful evening. Just let the coaches coach. Let the players play. Let the officials officiate the contest. and then you just be a fan and cheer in a positive manner. And we've got a wonderful atmosphere to be in.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off what all these guys have kind of said already, I think the biggest word is trust. You know, if that's kind of one takeaway that parents can come out of here with, is just trusting educators, trusting coaches, trusting superintendents, trusting the people that are in place to help your son or daughter do their job. I think that's the biggest part, because growing up, you know, I'd come home and I'd complain about a coach, or I'd complain about this, or I'd complain about that. And you know what my parents would tell me? They'd tell me to suck it up. Your coach is right. Your educator's right. Your professor's right. Your teacher's right. You're in the wrong here. And I think right now society is trending the other direction. I think parents question everything that happens. That's their first instinct, right, is to question everything that happens. But you as parents need to just trust coaches that they're making the right decisions, and that they're going to put your son or daughter in the best possible position to succeed, and the coach is right. They're not wrong. So that's my biggest takeaway, I think, to tell parents. And thanks for everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed being on this panel.
Yeah, I just want to close. I'm going to let Dave close here, but I'd just like to say, Dave, thank you so much for helping us get this going and being a part of this. Without you and your book, we probably wouldn't have done this. You know, we had a lot of people come in and out tonight, but you can't believe how many different people have said they want to watch this. So I think over the course of a long time, people are going to come back and watch this, and I think it's been an important hour and a half that we've been able to provide this service for them. So, Dave, would you come up and close for us?
Yeah,
Or stay there,
I can stay right here. I just want to, again, reiterate how much honor I feel to be sitting on this panel. There, you know, some of these people I've looked up to for a long time. I've worked with some of them. So much respect here for these individuals up here tonight. And again, thank you for Dakota Wesleyan for putting this on. I don't know how many of you, maybe the old-timers will remember George Amundsen. George was probably the greatest athlete ever to come out of Aberdeen Central, at least certainly in the conversation. He still owns the state discus record in track and field, set in 1969, and nobody's even come close to it yet. Former NFL player, played for the Houston Oilers. He happened to speak at my graduation in 1982. And one of the things that he said to us, as there were literally hundreds in the graduating class, he said, you know, I've attached some dollar bills under your chair, and, you know, you're welcome to have that. And of course, being the smart people that we were, because we were just about ready to get our diplomas, we all thought that he was just joking, and he wanted us to stand up and tip our heads and lose our caps. And so all of us, to a single person, nobody looked under their chair. We found out after the fact that after we left the Civic Arena, he went around and picked up all the money off the chairs, at the bottom of the chairs. So I don't know how well this is going to work tonight, but in my appreciation for you coming, I've attached 5 business cards to the bottom of the chair tonight. I don't know where you're sitting. Your chair might not even have one. If not, feel free to look around. There's a lot of empty chairs. If you have a business card, bring it back to the table. I'll give you a free book tonight. And again, I really appreciate you allowing me to come to this platform. And together, let's work to change the sports culture for the better for our future generations. Thank you so much.